Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here on our YouTube channel again for episode number 831. Well, hey, we are going to New York State today, and we are going to be learning all about flowers. Matter of fact, specifically, we're going to be learning about gladiolas. Megan Lamb is coming on. She is home from Cornell because of the coronavirus, but she's going to talk to us all about her studies to be an ag teacher and her business and her family's fourth-generation flower business there in the geographical center of New York State. We'll get that started for you right now. Joining me today is Megan Lamb, and Megan is currently studying agricultural sciences at Cornell University, and she's a former chapter president at the Stockbridge Valley High School in Munnsville, New York, as well as a former District 5 president for the state of New York, and a lot of proficiency awards to talk about here coming up as well. Megan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to talk about FFA. It's obviously one of my favorite things to do, so thank you.
You bet. I am looking forward to it, and man, we're in this new phase of life here where everybody I interview, I ask them how they're dealing with the coronavirus thing. Now, your episode's coming out in very early June, but we're doing this interview right at the end of April. So are you home from Cornell because of the coronavirus?
I am, yeah, actually. It was living in New York definitely, I think, hits you a little bit differently than potentially other areas across the country. But just like we've seen with this virus, it could change in a week's time. So, You know, my state is one of the heavier hit ones now, but that doesn't mean that in 2 days later it won't be as terrible as across the country. And I don't wish that on anybody, but it definitely is a little different. Driving on the road, going to the grocery store, you kind of miss all your friends and everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to ask you about that because New York is such an interesting state in that, I mean, almost not even in your state from a geographical standpoint. You've got the largest city in the United States and one of the largest in the entire world, New York City, and just this little slice of your state right down to the southern edge. And then you got the rest of New York, which spreads out and has all this farming and agriculture and outdoors activity and all this type of stuff. So obviously New York City has really had just a devastating time with the coronavirus. How has that been reflected in the attitudes and the feelings about this through people in the rest of your state? Are folks like, that's a New York City thing? Or are they like, no, it's a whole state of New York thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually fortunate enough to grow up in upstate New York. I'm 5 hours from New York City, and anybody who has taken a weekend vacation there has probably spent more time in the city than I have. So Personally, I have never spent too much time down there, but you know, I think a lot of the upstate New York people are considered essential workers. Like you said, we do have a pretty agriculturally based economy and industry up in upstate New York. And I think a lot of us we are still out going to work every day, out milking cows, out plowing the fields because it's spring planting season.
Right.
But yeah, I think it still hits us hard because even though there are a lot of people who will still commute to the city, even from my area. I know we're 5 hours away, but they would hop on a train every day, or some people even like get together and take a flight themselves. Like if they live in upstate New York, they kind of join together. Somebody has a jet and they all fly together. But yeah, it still always hits home just knowing it's your state. But for me personally, I'm very happy in a moment such as this to live in upstate rural New York.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I cannot wait to get to your area. One of these days, I'm definitely going to make that happen. You know, I've always, you're going to laugh at me for this, but I'm kind of a weather nerd. I really am fascinated with the weather. And I've always said that someday, like maybe when I retire or something like that, I'm going to spend a winter living in upstate New York right on Lake Ontario because I want to experience lake effect snow. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that because so many people in upstate New York, we always joke about the weather that a lot of people go south for the winter. A lot of people who are retired senior citizens, they all flock to Florida. But yeah, I've had quite a few snow days built into my school schedule. and sometimes we've had to take more than we have built in because of that crazy lake effect that we get in New York.
So, I mean, you are you're east of Syracuse, where you're at.
Correct.
And so
Yep.
you're a good, 50, 60 miles from the Great Lakes, is that right?
Yeah, that's about accurate. It's actually funny. My school district has the geographical center of New York State in it. So
Okay.
you put your finger in the middle, that's where we are.
Okay. So, but that far away, do you still see the impacts of lake effect snow that far inland?
Yeah, we do. It's actually pretty funny. Western New York, I have family out in the Wyoming County area. If you've ever heard of that, it's probably known for dairy.
Okay.
And they get it from from Lake Erie.
Okay.
But Central New York, like Syracuse area, I would even say like Utica, New Hartford, which is a smaller city. Our area kind of in there, if you could draw a circle between all of that and then the base of the Adirondacks, we really get it from Lake Ontario. So yeah, we get it.
Wow. So it comes. I just didn't know if it was just something that impacted right there on the kind of the shorelines, or if it came that far inland. But obviously, it comes that far inland.
Yeah, it does.
Oh,
It sure does.
Now, where you're at your home, are you on a farm or in town or something kind of in the middle of those two?
So I actually did grow up in a very rural area. I myself, in New York, a lot of farms are dairy farms. That's definitely our big agriculture industry by far.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally did not grow up on a dairy farm, but there are 4 dairy farms in my family. So I have spent a lot of time on each one of them, doing chores, showing cows. I'm very grateful for that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually grew up on a flower farm.
Oh, really?
Harvesting, cutting, planting gladiolas, dahlias, and other cut flowers. So that's my agricultural background.
Interesting. Now, when we say a flower farm, I mean, what are we talking about in terms of, I don't know, acreage or size or whatever? Is it expansive, or are you able to run like a self-sufficient flower farm on a smaller piece of property?
So that is actually the great thing about growing gladiolas, especially. We grow about 10,000 on my family's farm, and everybody hears the number 10,000 and they're like, whoa, like that's a lot. But we actually do it all on about 2 acres. A gladiola bulb is just about the size of a $50, and you can fit quite a lot of those side by side next to each other with only about a ½ inch apart. So we got quite a few gladiolas in a small amount of area. And that's what's great about agriculture. Sometimes you have crops that you can get a really high yield off of a very small piece of land.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to talk to you about your supervised agricultural experience and your proficiency stuff in a little while, but was the flower farm incorporated into that?
It definitely was. I was really lucky to be the fourth generation of my family to grow up around gladiolas, selling them at farmers markets, roadside stands. Just helping other people, educating them about simple gardening, and about our love for the gladiola flower.
Yeah, that's great. So how long has your family been, I guess, farming in New York State?
Farming in New York State, that is a great question. I wish I could give you an exact year. It definitely up since the 1800s. My family has pretty much always been involved in agriculture. Generationally back, I don't know as though there's really anything else we've done, but it's been a deep-rooted tradition, that's for sure.
Very cool. Okay. Well, let's talk about FFA. So when did you get involved, and why did you get involved?
I love that question. I officially got my first blue jacket in 7th grade. And started my FFA journey then, doing competitions, taking agricultural classes. But I actually can remember attending my own chapter FFA banquets at times when my feet wouldn't even touch the floor of the cafeteria where they were being held. Both of my parents are former agriculture education teachers and FFA advisors, so it's kind of that thing that's been ingrained in me all my life, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
Oh, very cool. Well, good for you. And I know you've had a couple FFA advisors along the way that we'd like to acknowledge. Let us know who those folks were.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to have Mrs. Patty Waldron. She was my first FFA advisor in our FFA chapter. She really is the one who focuses on our junior high members, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. But then I also had Mrs. Erin Smith, and she was my senior high advisor, and she was the one who definitely encouraged me and pushed me to serve as our district president, but then also as a state officer for New York FFA.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for acknowledging them. And really quick, I want to acknowledge a couple of our sponsors, Megan. Everybody, I want to make sure and remind you about Lacrosse Footwear. Just thrilled to have Lacrosse as a sponsor of this show. They make the absolute best neoprene-based rubber boot that you're going to find. This was a long process for me to find the right boot to use here on our farm, winter, summer, irrigation season, whatever it is. I wanted a good rugged boot that would stand up and not leak, and I finally found that in Lacrosse boots. And then about a year later, they became a sponsor of this show. I always love to talk about Lacrosse in these FFA episodes because they are proud to support the FFA by annually sponsoring 15 scholarships along with 100 jackets as part of the Give the Gift of Blue program. So everybody, please check them out over at lacrossefootwear.com. And then, of course, Powder River Livestock Handling Equipment, just the finest in livestock handling equipment for your large livestock, for your cattle. Of course, developed out here in the West where I live with some of the wildest cattle you are ever going to encounter, but we still have to get up and close and personal to those cattle a couple times a year, and they do not like it. And so Powder River had to design equipment that could handle those livestock being out here in the West, and they did. And they have made absolutely fantastic squeeze chutes, panels, sweep tubs, runways, anything that you need for your large livestock handling needs. Please let your local farm and ranch retailer know you'd like to see Powder River out there in their sales yard, and you can check them out at powderriver.com. All right, well, Megan, let's talk about your supervised agricultural experience or experiences. What were you doing with those throughout high school?
Yeah, so I, as I mentioned earlier, am a 4th generation to be able to grow gladiolas through my family. I grew up on a farm with about 10,000 gladiolas where we would market them to the local farmers market in Hamilton, New York, which is about 20 minutes from my high school. We would also sell dahlias, snapdragons, and a lot of other cut flowers as well. I've actually personally started to expand that business into doing weddings and special occasions, which is something that I really, really enjoy. I mean, I'm spreading my passion and my love for flowers to other people on one of their most special days of their life. So it's so humbling to know that they asked me to be a part of that. But I also help my grandmother on her farm, and she has about 14,000 gladiolas that she also will supply local florists with.
Wow, that is a lot of flowers, a lot of gladiolas.
Yes, it is, but it's beautiful.
That does sound beautiful. You know, I would love to get to your part of the country, and I'm telling you right now that my wife, my daughter, and I, we're going to show up there because they're going to want to see all these flowers.
You're always welcome.
You're totally on the spot. We're doing a radio interview. You can't be like, yeah, we don't really have visitors here, Matt, but thanks for asking. No, that sounds beautiful. I would love to see that. And obviously this goes deep in your family because your grandmother is actually, so you said you're raising 10,000 gladiolas at your place, and grandma's got 14,000?
Yes, correct.
So this is something that is being passed down, like you said, 4 generations worth of being passed down in your family.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that I'm very happy to be a part of in agriculture.
Wow. Now, do you know how this got started in your family? Like, I'm thinking of, so I'll give you an example. My wife and my mother-in-law, they're Dutch, and they're from the Orange City, Iowa area, which if you've ever heard of it or been out there, they grow a ton of tulips in Orange City because there's so many Dutch people there. And that, of course, goes all the way back to Europe where Dutch people grow tulips. So there's this deep, ingrained ancestral practice of growing tulips. Is there something like that here with you with the gladiolas?
I wish it was the ancestral, but it's actually kind of a funny story how it got started. It actually started with my grandfather. So he actually was having health issues, and he went out to the Mayo Clinic to have a surgery taken care of.
Okay.
And while he was there, he actually met a guy who was kind of going through the same type of surgery. You know, you meet somebody, you become friends with them, and you kind of do the checkups together. You go through the motions, and they actually got talking about agriculture. And my grandfather talked about how he had a dairy farm, but he also enjoyed doing gardening and those other aspects. And with his health, he'd kind of given the dairy side of the farm over to my two uncles, his sons, and he really took on the gardening part. And this friend actually encouraged him to start growing gladiolas, that you should market them, you should sell them. And my grandfather kind of really took it and ran. He met some other people in New York who were really passionate about it as well. And he and my great-grandfather were actually the ones who really started it and got inspired and really took it and ran.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's kind of a funny story how it starts, but yeah.
So there was a business opportunity there that kind of matched up with what your grandfather liked to do, and there you go.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Now, is there a name for this family business?
So my grandparents, their last name is Spencer. So theirs is called the Spencer's Glads.
Okay.
But my family is called the Country Lamb.
Oh, the Country Lamb. Okay. I like that. Obviously, your last name being Lamb.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So now I'm sure you've been working in this your entire life, probably for as long as you can remember. How has your responsibility in this business grown over time?
Yeah, so I can remember when I first started growing gladiolas, there's pictures of me when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and all I was allowed to do was go down through the row, and once we plant the gladiola bulb, we put a little bit of bone meal on top of them just to give them a little boost, a little extra energy, a little extra juice when they first start going, and that was my job. And
Okay.
the reason why is I could put as much or as little on top, and it wouldn't necessarily matter. They didn't let me do fertilizer because I might burn the bulbs or cover them. I might cover them too deep or not enough. But I started with that. But now I've expanded my knowledge and my responsibilities through my SAE to all aspects, weeding, fertilizer and water management, making those hard decisions about which ones we should cut out of our crop because they carry disease or they're just not as profitable as others. Just like in culling animals, you have to make those tough decisions. But we actually even show our gladiolas at like sanctioned shows, just like you would be for dairy animals. And I've actually really enjoyed taking on that role of picking out and selecting which flowers we should take to the shows and learning about the conformation of a flower and what it takes to get a really good show glad.
That is interesting. So with your family business, do you sell exclusively flowers once they're ready to be displayed, or do you also sell seeds or bulbs?
So that's actually a really great question. That's something I would love to continue to expand the business into, especially if I go and become an agriculture education teacher, giving those students a little bit of that agribusiness experience. I would love to be like a gladiola supplier or a wholesaler where you can sell your bulbs. But that's not something we've done yet, but it is in the works, and it's something I think I would really love and enjoy doing. Got
it. So the reason I was asking that is I was thinking about you going to different shows and competing against other people with your gladiolas. And I'm thinking about it on the livestock side. A lot of people, when they do that, they'll compete in market, and then there's no follow-up on that. But a lot of people will go and they'll show breeding livestock, and then as they win and they have success in the show ring, then that encourages people to come buy breeding and show livestock or breeding stock from them to grow their herds and to have those genetics. So I was wondering if you did the same thing there in terms of your shows, but yours are more like a market type show, like who's grown the best flowers.
Yeah, it is. Since flowers have a shelf life, and animals do too. I mean, they do. They have a lifespan of their own. But a flower, once you cut it, it's pretty much a week before it's gone.
Right.
And a lot of people actually have the same or similar varieties and similar colors. But what people have gotten into is hybridizing, like genetics and crossing of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you create like a new generation or a new variety, then you actually do have the rights to that, and you can sell that to other people, just as if like you had the top winning bull at a livestock show,
Mm-hmm.
that you can then sell his rights to other people. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Now, let's talk about what you're doing with expanding the business into weddings and special events. When did you begin that?
So I actually began that in 2014 when one of my cousins approached me about doing the flowers for her wedding. And I was pretty overwhelmed and kind of like intimidated, because I was only a 14-year-old, and she was wanting me to do do professional flowers for her wedding. But I took it on, and I loved doing it. It was such an exciting experience that actually was even fortunate enough to do my FFA advisor's wedding when she got married, Mrs. Smith. So that was probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've had with the whole wedding special occasion business.
Very cool. Now, are you running that as your own business, or is that being run under the name The Country Lamb?
So it is still being run under the name of The Country Lamb. And since I'm in college, it is kind of hard for me to be home and, do our inventory, take care of our bulbs over the winter, and be there all the time for everything, especially because when classes start back up in August, gladiolas are known as like the August flower or the late summer flowers. Mm-hmm. So some of our busiest time is actually in August and September, which I do go home for on the weekends, but being here during the week, it is kind of hard for me to take on the whole business when I'm an hour and a half away.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so you have had unbelievable success in terms of proficiencies. Can you run down that list for us really quick?
Yeah, I am very, very grateful for my experiences throughout FFA and the SAE proficiency portion of that. I was really excited that in 2017, I was chosen to be a national proficiency finalist for agriscience research plant systems. And I love the interview experience. I love talking about flowers, obviously. I could talk about them with people forever. And then the next year, I had applied for agricultural sales entrepreneurship, and I once again was a finalist, and that was also very exciting. And then this past year, this last national convention, I was a finalist for specialty crop production. So I'm very, very, very grateful for all of the experiences that FFA has been able to give me through this project.
Wow. Now, I've been able to go back to the national convention a few times, and I had a media pass, so I got to be downstairs and where you come in and off of the stage back in that area there. And I'm just picturing you showing up. You get there in 2017, everybody's like, Megan, welcome. We're happy to have you. 2018, oh, it's great to see you again. 2019, they're like, Megan, you know the drill. Just you know where to go. I think it's great. 3 years in a row on the stage in front of everybody being a national finalist.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's kind of rewarding now. Because my first year I was a finalist, I also served as a state officer, so I got to know quite a few of the people who were state officers from across the country and in other states, and each year since they have been volunteers at national convention, and it's always funny to be backstage and be like, oh, hey, like, how are you? Like, how are things in your state? Like, just a little 30-second catch-up conversation. It is really funny, just like being able to see all those people again.
That is great. Well, let's just touch on each one of these really quick. So what did you do for your agriscience research?
So as I mentioned, you can hybridize cross gladiolas to create like the next generation or like new colors. And that was actually what I really focused on in that project, was creating new varieties of gladiolas, that colors and certain characteristics that you hadn't ever really seen before. So that was something I really enjoyed. It is a goal of mine one day to be able to have like a gladiola introduced that I like can have my name behind, and people like can purchase it and grow it in all of their fields across the country too.
Very cool. Good for you. And have your name on it. That would be very, very fun. Okay. Ag business. Tell us just a little snippet of that.
Yeah, so that was primarily focused on the farmers market aspect of my SAE, but then also doing all the weddings and special occasions that I've done.
Okay. And then specialty crop production.
So that pretty much encompassed all of the production, the management practices, the decisions that you have to make growing the gladiolas, dahlias, and all of the other cut flowers.
Okay. Now, you're 20. Are you in your second year of college now?
That is correct. I am.
Okay. So have you received your American degree?
I actually did. Yeah. This last national convention in October, I actually was very fortunate to walk across the stage and get that chain with the key on my jacket.
Very cool. Congratulations on all this. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so you're at Cornell, you're studying ag sciences, and you are planning on returning to the classroom. Is that correct?
You got it.
Okay, so you want to teach ag and you want to inspire other students the way you've been inspired.
Exactly.
Good for you. Are you hoping to go back to Munnsville and to Stockbridge Valley or be in that area?
I've thought about it. I think if the opportunity came up, I would definitely interview because it is my home chapter. I mean, it certainly gave me a lot. But I also would be very happy going pretty much anywhere in New York. Serving as a district president and a SIT officer, you really do get to meet a lot of awesome members and supporters and advisors from all across the state and some across the country as well. And I think I would be content and I would have that sense of home and that sense of family anywhere across the state and find those people that would support me. So I think, I joke that I could find anywhere I can get a job is where I'm going to apply and start. But going back to Stockbridge is always something that I've considered. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Good for you. Well, before we wrap this up, I would love to ask your advice for other students out there. I mean, you've achieved a national finalist ranking, or however you want to put that, 3 times. So 3 separate years, 3 years in a row. You've achieved at a high level, and you've done it consistently, repeatedly, over and over and over again. What is the secret to that? If you got an incoming freshman who's listening to this episode, what would you tell them if they wanted to achieve something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a freshman coming into agriculture education, a lot of the first classes that you'll get is like an intro to agriculture or a basic agricultural science class where you get to learn pretty much about every single career pathway or every single industry in agriculture very briefly. And I would encourage them to find that one aspect of agriculture, that one thing that they are so passionate about that they don't mind getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for. They don't mind how many late nights they have. They don't mind how the weather conditions could really affect their crop that year. They do it because they genuinely love it. And finding that thing that you love, and it doesn't matter how many hours you put in, how many discomforts you have, quoting the FFA creed, that you do it because you genuinely love to do it. And I do. I think that's the passion to success. The secret to success is finding that thing that you're so passionate about and that you absolutely love to do.
Oh,
so I guess that's my advice.
Okay, well, very, very well said. Megan, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
Well, thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you to Megan Lamb for joining us today. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.